All right. Well, we are live and we're back to talk NFL drafts. We're going to talk the mid rounds today, and I have a very, very special guest today. I'm talking about Coach Matt Minich. Am I saying that right?
Close enough. A little less phlegm, but you're pretty good.
Okay, my bad. Look, Coach Matt is one of the most respected scouts on Twitter. I mean, this guy, he knows coaching, he knows prospects, and that is why we brought him on the show with our other expert, John. So you guys are in for a real treat today. This is like, I don't know, Kobe, LeBron. When you think about Bengals and draft previews, this is as good as it gets. So Matt, tell us a little bit about your background, please, and your expertise.
I coached football for over a decade. A little bit of that time was at Division I AA, South Dakota State. Then I kind of worked my way up the chain in D3. Spent a good amount of time as a defensive coordinator. So worked a little bit on offense when I was a graduate assistant at South Dakota State, and quite a bit on defense. And it's kind of my specialty is really with defensive backs from the majority of my time as a full-time coach.
All right, good. Now, so if it's okay, I want to, we're talking rounds 3, 4, 5, and we don't know where people are going to fall. So we're just going to talk about prospects that could be available there. Maybe some will go in the second round. We don't know. But these are guys we're interested in and we know could help the Bengals. So we're going to start with the wide receivers. And Michael Pittman is a guy who I know both of you like. So tell me how he fits in. So we know Tyler Boyd is our slot guy. We know John Ross is the burner. And I think the coaching staff is still counting on him to be that kind of X factor. So the guys we're looking at are more possession type of, wide receiver number 1, if you will, kind of an AJ Green replacement, right? So what do you see in Pittman that makes you think he could be our next, number 1 receiver?
Go ahead, Matt.
I mean, I think that Pittman brings a lot to the table. I mean, he is a bigger receiver. Definitely can play on the outside. He's not really known for speed, but you see him running away from guys. So I think he can be a major threat in that way. Really good routes, makes great adjustments to the ball, which with Joe Burrow coming in is a huge thing because Joe Burrow loves to throw those back shoulder fades. This is a big guy that can come in and make some of those catches. So I really like him where that's coming from. And I think he could fit into a similar role to AJ. Now, I don't know if he's going to be necessarily a wide receiver 1 type of guy in the NFL, though. So again, we're talking about this is a pick that we can make at 65. I think he's a round 2 quality, but if they're getting him at the top of the 3rd round, plugging him in there, I think he's got potential that maybe it's him and AJ. And Ross is the one that goes. If both those guys go, then you probably want to go back to the draft for a receiver and get a guy who's a little bit more dynamic down the field. To pair in there with him. But I think he does a lot of things really well. And I think he's a really good fit for the type of quarterback that we have coming in with Joe Burrow.
Yeah, I think Pittman has there's not a lot of downside to his game. And there's not a big trump card that you'd praise as a quality that you would take in the first round. But I think the thing about Pittman is that you would pair him with AJ Green, but you would allow Pittman to handle more of the X duties, and then when you have Green presumably for the next 3 to 4 years on some type of contract, you kind of ease him into more favorable roles for him in the later part of his career, kind of like what the Cardinals did with Larry Fitzgerald. You put him more in the Z, maybe put him more in the slot, and then you kind of groom Pittman to take over for what Green used to be in the prime of his career. I think that those two could work together kind of well in that way, if you will.
Yeah, well, like you said, I think that with a guy like Pittman, like you said, he's a solid all-around receiver, right? I mean, he does it all. He doesn't really knock your socks off. Am I right in that regard?
He's not a super dynamic. This guy can score a touchdown on any play type of guy.
Yeah.
But I mean, he does big guy stuff. Like he makes contested catches. He can make, find a soft hole in the zone and, make a catch and take a big hit from a linebacker or a safety or something, move the chains that way. So, I mean, he's not like just a possession, I said move the chains, but he's not just like a possession running good routes, being big, type of guy. But he's not going to really stretch the field either for you. So I don't know. I think ideally, I don't know if you're ever going to want him. I don't know if he's ever going to be a true wide receiver one for you. But he can, he can do some things that you pair him and you put him in part of the right offense with the right quarterback. And he's going to do a lot for your offense.
I think it says a lot about him and also the other guy we're going to talk about, Bryan Edwards. Whereas Pittman, we saw him elevate his game in the last year at USC. It's where he was most productive. We never really saw a giant leap in production from Bryan Edwards, even though those two have very similar strengths and very similar type of play styles. The problem with Edwards is that he was in South Carolina. They had crappy quarterback play for the entirety of his career. Most of his production in his most productive years were on a lot of quick, short passes, a lot of screens, because they just couldn't push the ball down the field. But you see the glimpses of Bryan Edwards, throughout his career, that you say this guy is capable of doing a lot more than what he was asked to do. It's just a matter of projecting a little bit more compared to a guy like Pittman, even though those two kind of share the same athleticism. So, Matt, do you think that Bryan Edwards could be along the same lines of a guy who has the potential to be an X-type receiver, but it's just too much projection? You just want to kind of ease him into that role as he goes along?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, he does a lot of the same types of things. He's great with contested catches again, and we're gonna say that a lot. But like again, Burrow is awesome with those back shoulders. He's awesome at throwing those balls up. Now we would love to be able to get a receiver who can create some separation, which the Bengals didn't have last year when AJ and John Ross were out. But I mean, I think he can do those things really well and fits into a good world with that. Like you said, you don't see a ton of it on film. You got to watch a bunch of film to get there. And he was a guy that my initial pass, I was like, all right, day 3, and I kept hearing about him. I was like, all right, better go back. And yeah, I mean, there's something there. He could definitely develop.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead, please.
Go ahead, Dadio. Go ahead.
No, please.
You've been quiet. You've been quiet for the past couple of minutes.
No, I know.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to like about Edwards, whereas he produced really early in his career. I think that he didn't test because he was injured, and unfortunately he couldn't test at the combine, but you definitely see the athleticism there. So there's just a lot of things to like. It's just a lot of projection. It's just a matter of, okay, where are you comfortable drafting this guy? Because I think right now he's projected a lot in the 3rd. Maybe you think 65 is a little bit too early. Maybe you see if he falls to the later part of the 4th round. It's these kind of discussions that just get really murky, and it's not my favorite part about the draft. It's just about, okay, what can this guy do well? What is his realized potential? What can you expect him to be? And Edwards is just like one of the weirdest guys, even though you'd think he has very, very similar skill sets to some of the best wide receivers in this class. But again, there's just not that one trump card, which is why his quote unquote draft stock is very much in fluctuation right now.
I mean, it's the same thing with Michael Pittman. To me, I gave Pittman a round 2 grade, but I think because there are so many good receivers in this draft, and he's not that dynamic down the field guy, maybe he could slip. I mean, I think in a lot of years, Pittman in the 3rd round is a joke. But I think he's a guy that could slip because he is a little bit more limited athletically than some of the guys that I think we're going to see go in round 2.
Yeah. Okay. Look, guys, if it's okay, I want to move on to linebackers. Now, the Bengals have started rebuilding their linebacking core. We have Jermaine Pratt. He's a starter, We've added some pieces. We have, through free agency. And we're probably going to draft 2 linebackers at least. Is that fair?
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to tell because they only have 7 picks. I mean, but I think they should, because of a complete lack of depth at that position. It would definitely be good to have 2. I
mean, they're not going to rely on the undrafted free agency. That's a little risky, right? I mean, that's
what they did at receiver last year for depth, and it didn't work out very well for them.
Yeah, there you go.
They took some guys that we liked, and I still like Damian Willis, and a lot of people were big fans of Stanley Morgan Jr., but it didn't really work out.
Yeah. So, I mean, okay, so let's look at some of these prospects that you guys have pointed out. We have Akeem Davis Gaither, right? From Appalachian State. And this guy seems pretty solid in coverage. Is that fair to say?
I would say so, and that's what he's going to have to be good at because, at being 6'1", 224 pounds, he's basically listed as that tweener size, but I think that's more or less going away as NFL defenses kind of evolve into more of the college, adapting to some of the offenses that are evolving every day as well. I think Gaither, Matt pointed this out on Twitter, and I think it's a great point. He had a lot of experience rushing the passer in college, but it's not what you want him to do because he just doesn't have the size and the body and the length to beat NFL offensive tackles. So he's going to have to make his money as an off-ball guy, and at being 224 pounds, it's going to be tough for him to succeed as a run defender, not just to be just not a liability, but to be a successful run defender. So in nickel and dime situations, he's going to be that overhang defender, and he's had to make his money, playing in the passing lanes, dropping back into short zones. But he has shown the propensity to do that at Appalachian State. He was very versatile there. He didn't test the combine, but if he did, he would probably have tested as one of the better, more athletic linebackers. So right now, that third or the fourth round range works for him because you like the potential that he has as a pass defender, even at that size, if you will.
Yeah, and I think he's a guy that, he really is an edge. Like, his usage is an edge, and I think he probably, if you want to comp him to somebody else in college, like the way he was used was more like Josh Uche from Michigan than a traditional linebacker. But again, he can't be that guy every single down. You do, unlike Uche and some other guys that are edges that we've projected that maybe being off the ball linebackers. I've seen some plays where he inserts himself in the box as the cutback player. So you see kind of some of those skills and how he can fill gaps and play the run. And he didn't come in as light as people thought he was going to. So, that's definitely a positive. I see that skill. It is a bit of a projection, but I see that skill. And I actually wrote the draft profile for him for Cincy Jungle, and my comp is Shaquem Griffin, because that's kind of the same thing he was at Central Florida. Coming out, he was a way too small for the NFL edge, and people didn't really know how that was going to project. And the Seahawks have made good use and gotten a lot out of him.
I think that he fits the mold of clearly what the Bengals are looking for. They're looking for guys that, you line them up in the box and offenses don't know if they're going to blitz, if they're going to drop back. They want a versatile guy to be that, jack linebacker in a 3-4. And I think he still has the capability of doing that. And I think you also have to look at the one tape that he had against a Division I opponent, South Carolina. He did a great job in that game of just kind of twisting and knifing through gaps. And not he obviously didn't have the size to take on blockers, but he had the athleticism and the flexibility and the balance to kind of dip around guys and still make plays. So if that's what you're banking on in the NFL, that's fine. There's not a great sample size, but I do think that athleticism-wise, he has the capability of doing basically multiple things in that role.
I mean, he's almost like a running back. Like, as you pointed out, like sometimes he's like, well, how did he get through there? He just kind of falls off blocks. It's pretty uncanny. And again, we'll see if it works when those blocks are coming from much bigger and more athletic guys.
Okay, yeah, and I'm looking at another guy you mentioned, Logan Wilson. And this guy from Wyoming, he is intriguing. He's a very solid tackler, but I have a feeling he's nifty enough to cover guys too, because he played defensive back and wide receiver in high school very successfully. And that's very intriguing to me as a prospect.
Yeah, I mean, that was the same thing we saw with Jermaine Pratt last year. He was a converted safety. Oddly enough, with Pratt, I felt looking at his tape in college that he was much better as a run defender than as a pass defender. And I think in pass defenses where he needs a little bit more development to be what we want him to be. But with Wilson, he seems to have a good knack for and understanding zones and being able to kind of progression read and find those guys in the zones. And he's got some good speed too. He's definitely an athletic player that you can work in there, particularly early on passing downs.
Yeah, I think he showed that he had enough athleticism at the combine. It's always interesting when you're dealing with guys who didn't play against great competition. Can they look athletic on tape? How athletic are they to the peers that they're going to be in the NFL? And I think he checked most of those boxes there. Definitely checked the boxes that the Bengals were looking for. He has production. He has experience. He was a captain at Wyoming as well for multiple years. Checks all those boxes as well. I think to your point, it's different when you're looking at just athleticism testing at the combine and seeing how that athleticism works on the field. If he understands where to be, if he can utilize that athleticism to his strengths. And again, at Wyoming, I'm not making a slight at you because you're a small school coach, but it's just a different level. It's a different progression going into the NFL. And I think not only does he have that athleticism, but he has that mental understanding about how plays progress and what gaps to be and what run fits to be in as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, and you're right. And there's a big, and I kind of commented on this the other day that like I hate the term small school because there's a big difference between even Wyoming to Appalachian State. I think is really, we're looking at a different level of competition, and those are all FBS schools. Whereas we want to talk about Ben Barch from St. John's. Now that's a different story. That's a much bigger deal, much bigger projection. But yeah, I mean he's seeing Boise State. He's not seeing LSU and Alabama every year. So you do have to adjust for that. And I think that, the physical aspect, I think, is one of the bigger areas of that to be able to judge it. I don't love him taking on blocks. And, again, how is that going to be when the level of competition goes up? So, there's a lot of unknowns there, but again, that's what the combine is for. We see that he can run. We see that he's, athletic compared to everybody, not just athletic compared to Wyoming. So, so that's what we can make out of that.
Yeah.
Are we quad boxing?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we are
big fan of Matt Minich. And even though I don't have a ton of time, I have a meeting. I said, I got to come on the show and say hi to to someone that I've really admired over the years, Mr. Minich. It is a pleasure and an honor.
Well, thank you very much, Doc. We appreciate being here.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, is that all you have, Hoji?
Yeah, because I wasn't really listening to the conversation, so I don't know where we are. If you could...
It's about the NFL draft, where we select college players.
Yeah, great draft coming up. It's going to be virtual, and that's always a good thing.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay? Well, let's go to the next prospect, which is Marcus Bailey from Purdue, and this guy, very smart player, all over the field, not necessarily the best athlete.
No.
And he suffered a couple of knee injuries.
That's never good.
Not good.
No, it's not.
But I mean, if Tua can do well in the NFL with a fake hip, what is a couple of knee injuries going to do to a person?
Well, that's a big question mark too. But hey, man, you're the doctor.
That's true. I'm not that kind of the useful kind of doctor, really. I'm more a doctor of opinions.
I got you.
And self-regard.
I think again, it's a big projection, and it is one of those things that we see as being a pretty stable prediction. That when guys get hurt in college, they get hurt in the NFL. However, every once in a while, you get a Frank Gore, who gets hurt a couple of times with major injuries in college, and then comes to the NFL and he's playing when he's like 40. So who knows? But he's a guy, Bailey, that I think is really good in coverage. Again, we talk about a guy that has a knack for coverage. He's reading the quarterback. He's making plays on the ball. You see those ball skills, not just – one thing I hate looking at, and as a DB's coach by trade, it gets in my head. Like I don't even have to write it down. Like I just notice on film when guys are making tackles in coverage and not making plays on the ball. And he's not that guy. He's getting in there and he's making a play on the ball quite a bit more than we're seeing with most guys at the linebacker position. So that's very intriguing to me to see what he can do. He posted it. Actually, Zach Taylor mentioned it in one of his Zoom interviews the other day. He's like, I just saw a linebacker that was injured, posted a video of a workout on YouTube, and that was him, running the bags. Like he looks good with that stuff. But again, how long is he going to be able to stay healthy when he's had two major knee injuries?
Yeah, and I think he was a redshirt senior as well, and that's not his last year. that's when he suffered most of his injuries. And he had a really productive 2018, if I believe. And had he just come out then, I think he probably would have been a lock to go in the first 4 rounds. Now it's just a question of where he goes sometime soon after that. So I think for Bengals fans, it's a matter of if that's the only linebacker you take, it's a big risk in terms of filling that need. But as a second linebacker that you take, maybe when you trade back sometime early, use him as an extra pick. Again, the asset to be, the ability to be an asset in coverage, the ability to know how to play in space, read quarterback size, have that fluidity in space. That's really valuable. And he has a lot of tackle numbers, a lot of tackle for loss. Maybe not be the most sure tackler, but again, for in that round, in that 4th or 5th round range, when you can be out there and be reliable on 3rd down, that's a big plus.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, having that guy to, now they brought in Josh Bynes. Josh Bynes a little bit more of a plugger. Like if you can bring in a rookie who's a little bit stronger in coverage, maybe that's the relationship and that's the usage. You just work him in during the season in coverage situations, and then gradually, hopefully he develops against the run. He was super productive last year, and again, and I'm one of the probably loudest proponents of this, but like tackles. Having a lot of tackles does not mean you're good at it. Just like having a lot of catches doesn't mean you don't drop the ball too much. But he had 115 tackles in 2018. So he was all over the field. And again, total tackles don't really mean much, but he was all over the field last year. But this year only made it 2 games into the season.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, even, people have their struggles. Bynes had his struggles. Bynes has worked his way up to being respected as he has become.
Undrafted guy.
Yeah, he was undrafted. He had his own little spinal problems, from what I remember. So I don't see the injury thing being too big of a deal.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
okay. The other thing about injuries too is you wonder without. To me, like everybody made a big deal about the virtual draft and the fact that they couldn't travel. Now we see Cam Dantzler and Jalen Reagor posting videos of them running 40s, and the times are nowhere near what they look like. But so look, you can do a virtual pro day. Zach Taylor the other day in the interviews, in his press availability was talking about how it seems like they actually have more ability to talk to players right now. They're able to call them, I believe it's 3 times a week for an hour. So they can talk to a lot of guys and get to know a lot of guys. Yeah. They can see them work out if they need to. The difference this year is you can't get your own medical staff to look at them. And that's what's going to be really interesting about Tua. But guys like Marcus Bailey, like Laviska Shenault, some of these guys who have injury issues, they could be incredible values later in the draft, but just a risk, if people aren't willing to take that risk.
Yeah, but when it comes to the Bengals, it really works to their advantage, you could say, because their medical staff is just Nurse Betty, as we've discussed before.
Yeah. Well, but if until Nurse Betty can see what's going on, you don't really know what's going on, because Nurse Betty has her own way of doing things.
She does. But I mean, I'm just thinking about her, you look at the past of the Bengals. Look at like AJ Green, he tweaked his ankle. He may never play again,
That's true.
Yeah.
I mean, and you look at the last few drafts too, and how those guys have come in with injuries, and Jonah Williams. We didn't know about that injury, but then you go back and you look at not the year that we drafted him, but the previous year he was wearing a brace on his shoulder throughout the year. Coach
Minich, Minich, can we just talk about the elephant in the room here for a second? Because you're a coach and you know things, and maybe I don't know things. Maybe I'm just a humble guy. But I want to ask you a question, and it's the elephant in the room. Can the Bengals be an elite team with an elite QB and not have an indoor practice facility? Because is that why people are getting hurt? Is that what the issue is? Is that what makes us undesirable? Is this whole indoor facility thing a big deal? Or am I just kind of like out of it?
I don't think it's a huge deal, but I mean, you make a good point that there are going to be certain free agents that probably be like, no, I don't want to go there
because it gets icy. You break your hip.
November, December. I'm not going to be there. So I mean, and again, I was a college coach. That's recruiting. You know, you build an indoor facility, you build any kind of facility, and it's huge for recruiting.
Exactly.
No denying that. So really free agency is recruiting as well.
I was walking outside just yesterday and I just fell on my face. Outside is dangerous. You need inside. Outside is dangerous. Inside is safe.
Just in terms of recruiting, having an elite quarterback is the best way to recruit players. Let's be honest.
I mean, and there's no doubt in my mind that Joe Burrow is a big reason why they're having such a good year in free agency.
Yeah.
I mean,
DJ Reader, a lot of people wanted him.
It makes them more desirable because you know you're expecting them to be able to compete. Maybe not next year, but in the next couple of years. And that's money in these guys' pockets too. It's not just about winning; it's also about getting playoff checks.
Well, so going to Burrow, we got to protect that guy at all costs. Now, John, can you give us a quick recap? Can you give us a state of the line summary? Where is our offensive line? Who are the solidified starters? And what is up for grabs? Real quick, so we can then talk about the prospects and what kind of positions we need as starters, what kind we need as backups.
So they're banking on Jonah Williams and his shoulder injury.
Left tackle, right?
Fine. Yes, at left tackle. They're banking on Michael Jordan at left guard. They're probably not going to give him much competition there. They just signed Trey Hopkins to a 3-year deal. He's starting at center. They signed Xavier Su'a-Filo to replace John Miller for now. They might bring in some guy to compete with him at right guard. And they have Bobby Hart and Fred Johnson competing at right tackle. They're going to give Fred Johnson every chance to win that. And so, we're looking at a guy who can potentially compete at right guard and maybe has the versatility to play outside as well.
Okay, so it sounds like the right side is not as solidified, right?
No.
So we're looking for right tackle, right guard, probably.
Yeah.
Fair to say. Okay, so
for the people who are out there who might not, be up to speed on this, why can't you put a left guy on the right and the right guy on the left? Is this a handedness issue? What's going on here? Is it like playing guitar left-handed? What's up? Why can't you just switch him around?
Have you seen Zoolander?
Yes, many times.
Some of these guys just aren't ambi tackles. You know what I mean?
That's
no, obviously, but it's one of those things that sometimes people kind of get in a mold with things. Now you do need versatility on your offensive line, and really the more difficult position, the more unique skill set is a tackle. That's why these guys make a lot more money. That's why these guys usually go higher in the draft. Because it's a more valuable position by the nature of it as well. But it's a harder position to find people at. So if you can play tackle, they'll kind of stick you on the same side, and you can play. You'll play tackle and maybe guard on that side, or be what they call a swing tackle to be able to play both tackle spots. But with these guards, they need to bring a little bit of versatility to be able to play left and right, because. Now, the new CBA, there's going to be more availability from offensive linemen, the way they worked it out. But generally, you're not going into a game with 10 offensive linemen, so there's no backup left guard and backup right guard. So you do need, guys that are versatile, that can move around. And, in general, most teams don't have a backup center necessarily. It's moving another piece around to fill that role. So you do have to have some versatility. I think it matters more at the tackle spot, because that movement, in particular, like the kick step, it's a little bit, it's a little bit more dramatic. It takes up a little bit more space. I do think, what's the value of a right tackle versus a left tackle? I think that gets overplayed a little bit. We forget that. Who was the first guy that was really known as a great left tackle?
That was Ogden, wasn't it?
Well, I would say the first guy I would say was Anthony Munoz.
Yeah,
great player.
And he wasn't, and the left tackle wasn't the blindside guy, because his quarterback was Boomer Esiason. For
that's a good point.
His career. So I don't know. I think there's a little bit of a mental thing with it. There's also the right defensive end tends to be better, but it is a little bit mental there, but. Guys do have trouble, switching from side to side at times. It's interesting in this draft because a lot of the better tackles are right tackles in college. So we're probably it's going to be an interesting experiment, especially without likely OTAs and maybe an abbreviated training camp. We're probably going to see some career right tackles making that switch just based on their draft position.
Yeah, but I want to talk real quick about tackles. And the first one is from Auburn. Prince Tiga Vanagho. Am I saying that right?
We wouldn't know, Dadio.
I wish I could
Okay.
tell you for sure.
Yeah. So look,
It's so far off from what the word is that we just don't know.
yeah. Well, look, this guy, he's a prince from Nigeria. He's an actual prince
Oh, that we need one of those.
from Nigeria. His grandfather was the king of his village. So we're talking about a you know, like a legit village. Hoji, I don't know if you've seen a legit village.
He's pulling his upper village, lower village stuff on. This is beyond you guys. You guys don't want to. This is where we come from. He's upper village. I'm lower village.
Yeah. So but what this means is he's relatively new to football. He just started to play to kind of get in shape, right?
Yeah.
He's just like, oh, why don't I do this football thing? And he's like, oh, I'm going to get drafted into NFL.
He was actually he thought he was going to be an NBA basketball player. Like he got recruited. He came to the U.S. on a prep school scholarship to play basketball.
Exactly.
Football at Auburn.
Yeah, exactly. And so he has a lot of room to refine his skills. That is clear. I mean, this guy has a lot of room to grow. Good athleticism, not so long arms, kind of long problems with the reaching and all that. But yeah, I mean, you look at the in terms of taking a chance on a guy with very high upside. This is that guy, right, John?
Yeah, I think Matt has watched a little bit more of him than I have. But like you said, he came over from Africa. He lived with a family, the Tengas, I think, is what I think is American and Alabama family was. But yeah, Auburn had two good tackles. Jack Driscoll's the other one on the other side. But Winoga is the guy that you want to develop into a high-end starter. He's got the athleticism. He's got the length. He's got the functional strength. He's got a lot of good things going for him. It's just this tackle class is kind of ridiculous at the top. There's probably going to be 7, maybe even 8 guys to go in the first round. Winoga is not going to be one of those guys. But in the second, third round, I think for a guy that you could be comfortable playing on both sides down the line, I think that he has a lot of the tools to do that.
Yeah.
Now, have you guys talked about the possibility of Jonah Jackson yet or not? Is that that's for later?
I don't know what the hype is with that guy. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think it's just that you can get someone kind of late in the draft who could fill.
No, people are talking about him in the second or third round.
Yeah, I know. But I mean, I'm saying later because later in the draft he was worth it. Maybe earlier not. He's got the good reach and he did okay at Ohio State. I mean, John, you're not a fan, I take it.
I think John is afraid of drafting more Ohio State linemen.
I've been afraid to talk about the guy for that very reason.
But here's my thing: it's okay to draft them as long as being from Ohio State isn't one of the reasons you draft them. Like with, I'm not going to mention names.
Please do.
No, I can't. I even forgot his name. That's how bad he is. What's that center's name? That guy.
The interior offensive lineman class this year is not great, and it's never about just looking at the quality of the class, because like Matt says all the time, you only draft 1 or 2 guys from that, and as long as those guys are good, that's fine. I think the nature though is that the majority of these guys, these guards and centers, they're not of high opinion. So a guy like Jackson, who to his credit did very well in the Senior Bowl, I think he's getting propped up a lot, and he might not be as high in actual NFL circles as the media is proclaiming him to be. There's just not a lot of actual tangible traits that you could work with there. It's just the matter of he just didn't allow a lot of pressure, didn't allow a lot of sacks at Ohio State. He just kind of made it work. And it's that same mindset that people got so enamored with Billy Price, because it was the matter of they didn't see a lot of athleticism. There obviously wasn't any length, and there's a lot of waist bending. There was just a lot of he just somehow made it work against Big Ten defensive linemen, and they're not just the best competition to compare yourself against to anyways. So it's just a matter of like Jackson just made it work there at Ohio State, but there's not a lot of traits that you say he can do this in the NFL against much better competition.
I think that's the thing. I think the thing about Jackson is he had a really good season, and he was able to play at a few different spots, and he got a lot of positive screen time. He doesn't have the gender fluidity that John says a good football player needs.
No, not gender. No, Oji, that's not gender fluidity. Like fluidity.
I believe when I came here, I was listening to John, and he was like going on and on about gender fluidity. And
that is not something you look for. You can't ask people that in the interviews. You can't look into that.
Anyways, but he had a great season, and he was in front of the camera a lot, and he did good things, And I think that's why people like him. It's like if you're in the spotlight and you do well, then there's always that chance that throughout the season, you're going to do fine, because he was under a lot of pressure and he was able to do well in a bunch of different positions. And I think if he's there, third, fourth, we take him.
Okay, look, it is getting kind of late. So I'll let you guys pick the last prospect. Let's talk about the guards. We're looking at Netane Muti from Fresno State, Robert Hunt from Louisiana, and Tyler Bynes from Wisconsin. How about John? You tell me one, and Matt, you tell me one that you like the best.
I think if they're going to draft someone in the third round, I think Hunt is probably the favorite to be that guy, because he was a tackle at Louisiana, not LSU, but just Louisiana Lafayette. But he has the body of a guy who can succeed very well at guard. You question, again, the strength of competition, the fact that he's going to be 24 years old, and he was just mauling these guys down there. But you see a lot of the traits that you want. You see a guy who can slide inside the guard, who can operate well in his own scheme, and can just bury guys. The strength there is immense, and that's the main thing that you're looking for. You don't have any testing numbers with him because he did not test the combine, but a guy that has experience at tackle, a guy that has the physicality and the strength that Jim Turner is going to like as an offensive line coach, to be able to play guard, but also to kick outside the tackle if you absolutely need him. I think he would be a second-round prospect if he had testing, if he was maybe a little bit younger, but I think they can find good value with him in the third round.
Well, the issue is going to be with Zach Taylor's new pristine Bengals that he's trying to do is the 2017 felony charge. That's going to the suspension.
That's also why he's more of a murky evaluation as well, and that's really what it all comes down to. It's that you don't have as many opportunities to see with these guys face to face. It's a matter of trust and how you can handle that relationship.
Look, if it were Marvin Lewis, it's done. He's in, because Marvin had this great ability to bring in people who might have had a checkered past and some issues like that, and work with them and work on them as a father figure and get them, like that, like in the game.
With the big chest, like that, sticking out their chest. They're so
and it worked. But then I feel like the new Bengals is trying to break that image of the bad boys.
Yeah. I mean, look, let's be honest. This team is going to be centered around the quarterback. That is great. This is an offensive league now. We're going to be a high-powered offense. And, we might be more of a finesse team. With Marvin, we were more of a defense running, gritty, nitty team, We might be a little more of a finesse team, and that's okay. I'm fine with it. Matt, give me a guard.
So on Hunt, like you said, I think the projection of guard makes a ton of sense because he's a people mover. Like, he gets movement. He's not great at kick stepping. Doesn't have the flexibility or the athleticism or something. It's just not great. So I definitely think a move inside the guard makes a lot of sense for him. And we see that with a few guys. Tyler Bynes from Wisconsin is the guy that I'll mention, though. So last year, he was considered one of the top interior offensive line prospects. He was the Remington Award winner for best one of the best offensive linemen in the country. And nobody understood why he didn't declare for the draft. But then he got off-season hip surgery. So I don't know if he's, went to Tua's hip guy or what the deal is. But he did have hip surgery this year. He was different. He wasn't as good. He also had a shoulder injury during the year that he played through that, could cause him some problems as well. So, again, this is a projection. Now, was he struggling because he hadn't fully recovered from the hip thing? And in 2020, could he be back to what he was a year ago? If you think that, you take the guy because you're going to get a great value for him. But the problem is we're not going to have medicals on him. You're not going to be able to get him in your facility and have your doctors put their hands on him. So it's a bit tough. But I think you go back and you watch his 2018 film. I mean, he was really good. And with where this is going to work out because of the medical situation, to get him as a day 3 pick, maybe he ends up being a backup, or maybe he reverts to to what he was before, and he ends up being a starter for you in the interior offensive line. He played center at Wisconsin, but we see this with guys all the time. Just because he played center in college doesn't mean he can't bump out and play guard in the NFL. So obviously we feel good about Trey Hopkins, at least, in the short term. So if you want to, have him compete at right guard, he can definitely do that. And then, maybe they're moving on from Hopkins in a couple of years and he makes that transition inside. But I think just the value that you can get for him on day 3, it's huge. Now, what you have to balance with that, though, is you can find starters on day 3 at the guard position, and like Damian Lewis from LSU. I think there's a good chance to get him in the 4th round, and he could come in and start at that right guard position. Probably a little bit more of a sure thing because he doesn't have the injury issue coming up, but maybe not the same upside that you get with Biadasz.
Okay, well, I think that's a pretty long show. We gave people a lot to think about. I'm hoping that, I know the Bengals don't spend a lot on scouts, so we've made our show free for them to watch if they need ideas for drafting. And speaking of money, it is free, but we will run some ads, and we also have a Patreon account. You can support us. I don't know why, but you can on patreon.com/DHSports. I want to thank John and Professor Coach Minich. And Hoji, he showed up to get his cut of the show. He knew it was going to be a big show. He came in. But technically, he's in the show.
I need the royalties, man.
Somehow, he was more informed coming 15 minutes late than when he says he wants to be on the show. It's very interesting. I guess he was doing his research. We appreciate that.
Well, I always do. You know that.
Yeah.
I know.
I know.
Dem facts. That's what I call them. I call them dem facts, and I care about them.
And that is all we have for this show. So thank you. We will see you next time. So long. SVT. Bye.